Hi everyone. So in the last video, I talked and showed you how to install Python in your local system, right? And you might have also remembered that I talked that there are few more prerequisites or checkboxes that you need to tick off before we can start coding in Python. So here's the second or a very important step, which is installing a text editor or a code editor. Okay, what is an editor? You all know, right? You have all used probably Microsoft Word or Notepad or things similar to that, where you can write and edit your text. So code is also something very similar to text, right? But it is very structured. And there needs to be some specific application where you can write codes, you can edit them, and you can debug them. What is debugging? Usually finding out bugs or errors in your code is called debugging. So you want to do that, and for that you need a specific application, almost similar to Microsoft Word but just a bit more specific towards your use case. Now in the market there are so many free open source code editors that you can use, but among them I usually love three of them. One is called Visual Studio Code, the second is Atom Text, and the third is Sublime Text. You can use any of them. There's not many differences between these applications. It is completely based on the user's choice and preferences which code editor he or she chooses. So there's no I won't say like there's a lot of pros and cons using one editor versus the other editor. It's completely based on your choice. In this particular tutorial, I usually prefer working with VS Code or Visual Studio Code, which is built by Microsoft. So I would show you how to install that in your machine. Okay, so first of all, you need to open your browser, whatever browser you're using. I am using Google Chrome. So open a browser, and in the search bar, you can start writing Visual Studio Code. If you write Visual Studio Code and search, you can also write VS Code, because this is very popularly known as VS Code. You would see the first option is code.visualstudio.com. This is the official site for Visual Studio Code. If you click on it, it will basically show you the place from where you can download. Usually this kind of sites automatically detects the OS or the operating system that you're working on. That's why you could see like it already is showing me download for Windows stable build. If you are using something else, or probably if it is not able to detect your particular OS, you could just click on the drop down and you would see like it has all the three types of OS, right? Mac OS, Windows, Linux. You can very easily download on based on the operating system that you are working on. I am working on Windows, so I would be downloading Windows only. So just click on the this button, and it would automatically would start the installation, the download, and it would also ask you to basically choose the folder where you want to download. I have already downloaded it, so I won't do it. So it should actually, if you are in Windows, it should download a executable file or .exe file. Let me show you guys how to install from that. So I have already downloaded the .exe file. You could see this VS Code user setup.exe. Just double click on it. Now, usual with this kind of application, it would first tell you to accept the license agreement that you can do. Click next, and in the next one, these are all very similar to any other application that you might have actually used, and here it will basically ask you to whether you want to, where exactly you want to basically install the setup. I am fine with the default location, so I click next. Again next, this is basically asking whether it should create a program shortcut in the start menu folder, and also like whether you want to create a start menu folder or not. Next, and now this is again a very important step. You might have remembered that during Python installation as well, I have stressed a lot upon adding Python or anaconda to the path, to the system path or the user path. What is that? I have also basically told you about that, right? So basically adding to the path means you could access the application from anywhere in your system, because usually if you install an application in a specific folder, you can only access that application by browsing to that folder only. So this is usually applicable to most of the application that you install in your machine. But things like Python, which is the programming language, or this code editor, you want to open it in everywhere, anywhere and everywhere in your machine. It shouldn't be basically restricted to particular locations. For that, it needs to be added to path. You can do it manually as well, but the manual process is a little bit tough. I will show you just afterwards, but it's tough, and not only tough, but it's also very complicated. And if you don't understand that, there's possibility that you might change something else and you would basically damage your system. So that's why it's better to actually do that while installation itself, because this kind of applications, they automatically gives you the option to adding it to path. You don't have to do anything but just check this box. That's all that you need to do. Other than that, the other things like creating a desktop icon or things like that, these are optional, but always keep these two checked in, like adding to the path and register code as an editor for supported file types. Okay, doing next, and now it will say I can start installing it. So it actually, if you do not I just after this thing, I will also show you how to actually go and edit paths. But I would also stress a lot that do not try this if you do not understand, because this can damage other applications in your system as well if you do not understand and do something which is not required. Okay, now my installation has been complete as well. You can just launch it to see whether it's working or not. If you just click on finish and the launch was ticked off, you would see like, okay, this is starting up nice and fine. We would later see like how to use that, not in this video, but it has been downloaded, it's installed, and now you can open that. This is also how you can actually access that. I will show you two things. One is the GUI way, or I would say the graphical user interface way. Another is a programmatic way that I would show in the later video. So in the search bar, you could just start writing VS Code and it should come up, Visual Studio Code, and you can just, because this, it has been basically installed as an application, so you should be able to start it from here as well. Okay, the last thing, so similarly you can use Atom as well. So just to showcase you, you can just search Atom text editor, and usually the first option that you would see is for the text editor itself, and you could similarly download for Atom and actually install it in your machine as well. So you don't need multiple, you don't need multiple code editors. Even one is fine. You can even actually code with Notepad++, which is kind of a Notepad extension where you can write codes as well. So any code editor is fine. Basically, some code editors will look beautiful to someone, and it also provides you with some features which basically help you to write codes. That's why people choose one over the other. It's completely on your own preferences. I usually prefer working with VS Code. That's why I have shown you this thing. If you are basically preferable to some other text editor, like say for example Atom or Sublime, you could always go for them. There's no issue with that. But obviously you need one text editor, one code editor to go with. So I'm actually interchangeably using text editor and code editor, because at the end of the day, functionally they are all same, but basically you need one code editor to go with. Okay, the last thing before I finish up, I want to showcase you how exactly you can change the system path. This is again an optional. You could skip it off if you do not want to see, because usually I do not want a beginner user to actually do these stuff, because these are something which can harm your system. Okay, in the search bar, you can just start writing edit environment variables, and you would see that there's an option called edit the system environment variables. This is where you have to go, and this is a dialog box that it should come in like this. A system properties dialog box should come in. If you do not find it there, what you could also do is go through settings. So you could just open up the settings of your system. Since I am in Windows, the settings look like something like this. Okay, now if you go to the about section, go to the about section in the system. Here you would be able to see some system information, and in the right hand side there is something called advanced system settings. So you could just click on that, and again you would find this particular system properties window. Here if you would see there is a button called environment variables. This is where you have all these things stored. If you click on the environment variables, you would see there's something called user variables and there's something called system variables. So usually what happens in a system, especially in Windows or in any operating system, you have someone called administrator or root user, and then you have other users. So obviously all users doesn't have the same privilege as the administrative users or the root user. So that's why these two divisions. And here you would see one variable called path, both in the user variable and in the system variable. Usually this is where you have to basically come up and add a new path. If you are using as a user variable, you can add a new path over here. As you have seen, like here the last path is basically for the Microsoft VS Code. This particular path has been added just by me, just by installing the VS Code with that checked off. If you haven't done that, if you haven't checked it off there, you have to add it over here, coming over here. Or you could actually do it for system variables as well. There's a little difference between administrator privileges and user privileges and administrator variables versus user variables. We won't go into details on that. But this is where you have to basically change or add a path if you have to do it manually. But as I have stressed upon multiple times right now in this video, you should actually try to avoid this, because these are a bit complex for especially new users or beginners. So you don't want to meddle with something that you do not know, understand properly, and there might be some things that you just unintentionally have changed, and it might actually harm your system. That's why it's better to actually add the path from the installation window itself, which is basically you would find in most of these type of applications that we are installing right now. So hopefully after this video you have learned or installed one code editor in your local machine. Thank you guys for your time. Hopefully we will meet again next time with some new content. Like, share and subscribe if you actually like this kind of contents and want me to create more contents like this. Thank you. Keep learning.